Hey, today I'm going to give you a run through of the new invoicing features in CrewCall as of version 3. Let's get into it. The first thing you're going to notice when you open CrewCall is this new Invoices tab down in the bottom. When you select Invoices, you've got a list of your invoices, which currently we have none, and then you're going to have a list of your clients. Clients are production companies which you have used for previous jobs. So if I tap over to the Jobs tab, tap and hold on a job and select Edit Job. In the previous section where you would put in your production company, you now see a list of production companies down here which can be changed. I'm going to leave it set as it is. Over in the Invoices tab, we'll select Invoices, and this is how easy it is to make an invoice. You tap Add, and it says, would you like to create an invoice from a job or blank? You can select blank and build it from scratch, but the easiest option is to select from job. This lets you turn jobs you've already logged into an invoice. So you tap the job and you can select any job that you've logged previously. You can convert the entire job, or you can select a date range if you just wanted to invoice for specific days of a job. We'll leave entire job set. Here is an invoice template, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But you can select whether you want to import your labor, your equipment, or your mileage. And also give you a warning saying there's no import options. This basically says, do I want to convert my labor to an invoice? Yes. Do I want to import my equipment to an invoice? Yes. Do I want to import my mileage to an invoice? Yes. Once all this is selected, you select Create. There you go. You've got an invoice. So you can tell the total there, when it's due, and it gives you a summary of the linked job, the invoice number, and the production company. When you go in here, you'll see a complete overview of your invoice. So it tells you the production company, which can be changed after the fact if you so desire. You've got the invoice date, which is set to today's date, but you can change it. And then you've got a due date, which you can also change. By default, it's set to 30-day payment. You can mark invoices as sent and you can mark them as paid. You've got your subtotal here, options for discounts, options for tax. In Australia we call it GST, but other places around the world might call it VAT or tax or anything like that. You've got your total, and then you've got some generated job notes. And then if you go over to the line items section, you'll basically see all of your job has been converted into line items. So you've got, focus puller day one, which covers single time, overtime. And then if you go further down, you'll have all your equipment listed, combined into a single line item per day. And then you'll also have your mileage listed. Now this is where the magic happens. You basically just tap PDF and you've got an invoice generated here. So I'll go in a little bit closer. You've got the production company listed in 2. You've got your details listed in the From section. You've got a title, which is the invoice number, invoice date, due date, total. And then all of your line items are presented neatly on the invoice. Goes through with a description, unit cost, quantity, and the total for each section. And then down the bottom here, you've got your job notes and you've got your subtotal and your total. Now that's basically it. So if I delete this invoice for a second, these are the steps in a very quick manner. Add, select job, create, tap, generate PDF. That's how quick it is to make an invoice. Now, you can do a whole heap of customizations. So if we want to apply discounts, you can select discount and you can apply a % discount. So you might be able to do a 10% discount and you'll see an update down here as you make adjustments. And you can even do finesse adjustments in case you need to do very specific discounts. Or you can do a flat rate discount by amount. So you might just discount $555 and you'll see that down there. You can also apply tax. So at the moment it says no taxable items, and where this is changed is in your line items section. So if you select a line item, you're going to have all these details here. So you can change the name, you can change the description, and that is what you see here and here. You can also change the unit cost, so I might change that to 80, and you can change the quantity to 10 or whatever you want. This here is where tax is applicable or not. So if tax was applicable to this line item, it would be $80 of GST. If it was unapplicable, it doesn't charge. But back over here in the tax tab, you can see, is your tax called GST, or, you know, it might be called VAT. Is it 10%, or it could be 9% or 19%? But you can see here it's applying non-taxable line items are 14 and taxable line items are 0. So if I want to make the entire invoice taxable, I can select that, and basically it will update each line item so that this toggle for tax is enabled. You have the option to change it by line item, because there's certain things, if you're doing a reimbursement or something like that, you might want to say, I don't want to have, that's not taxable. So you can see here you get a little bit more of a detailed overview when you have a discount and tax applied. So, you know, you've got your subtotal, discount, discounted subtotal, your tax, and then your total. And when you generate an invoice, you get a bit more detailed summary down here, which shows you subtotal, discount, tax, total. Now, that's just getting started. There are so many customization options that you can make it set up so that things are super easy for you. So back in this Invoices tab home, where you've got invoices and clients, there's another section up in this top left, invoice settings. So up here, this is where you set up your company details. So you have your name, your billing address, you have your email. All of these details are essentially what gets shown in this top section when you generate your invoice. So that's where they're changed and where they are set. You can customize your invoice number to your heart's content. So at the moment it's saying 24003. I can separate each component with a different element. I can put a prefix in. Some people might want, you know, IMV for invoice in there. They might want an underscore as the element. You might not want to see the year. You might want to jump through various numbers. You might want to reset. Your prefix might include your own kind of custom year or something like that. It's all to your, however you want. It's quite customizable. I quite like having none with no prefix, and then it gives you, you know, the current calendar year by your number, and then that number just counts up throughout the year. So that's the default, but you are able to tweak it. Invoice design. This is really cool. So if you click in here, you basically have your invoice design. You've got your logo loaded up, and you can adjust the scale of your logo, and you can adjust whether it's centered or weighted to the top. I find if the logo is smaller, it looks better weighted to the top, and if it's a bigger logo, it'll look better weighted in the middle. You can also change the color theme of your invoice. So if you select here, you've got a color picker, and you can kind of change how your invoice looks. And if you go over to spectrum, you can kind of pick any color that you like. And then you get a preview down here, which updates in real time. If you want to clear out your invoice logo, you can delete logo, and without a logo, you'll just have a blank section up the top here. Something I particularly like is if I load in a logo and say I pick this red one, and it loads in that logo, which looks cool. I might tweak it to be just a little bit bigger. But if I select color, I can select color picker, and then I can pick the same red out of there, and it's going to apply that to my invoice. So I get a really uniform color theme, which is pretty cool. Now, I'm going to explain invoice templates in a minute, but down here we've got notes. I'm going to just talk about that quickly. So generate system notes is essentially what you saw here. So when we created this invoice, it will create default system notes with the job name. Job number will be blank, so you could just fill that in as, you know, job number. And then it will give you a description of each shoot day or any day that you've logged, basically detailing the day of the week, the date, and the times that you did, which acts as like an overview of your entire job. So because they're the system notes, you can choose if they're generated or not. But you can also assign your own default notes. So you might write, you know, thanks for having me, and hit save. Now you can either have that go before the default notes or after the default notes. So for example, if I delete this invoice and I recreate the same invoice, I'll have a look here and it will say invoice notes. Now this section is my system notes that have been generated, and then you've got your default notes that you've put in that will show up at the end. So you can have both system notes, which gives all that detail automatically, and you can also have your own personalized message that you pick. And when you generate the invoice, it's got your payment details down here, whether you get paid via bank or some other method. So that is essentially accessed from in here where you have your payment details. Invoices can lock once they are sent or paid. So by default, it's set to sent. So if I went in here and I changed that to sent, basically that means I cannot go in and delete a line item. I cannot go in and change the discount because I've sent the invoice, it's locked off. But you have the option of changing when that happens. You might want the invoice never to lock, or you might want to lock it once it's been paid. That's up to you. One other thing I did quickly want to show you while you're here in this invoices section, I'm going to unmark it as sent so I can edit it again. But line items can absolutely be reordered. So you can tap up here and basically just tweak and move them around as you see fit. So you can order it how you like. If you wanted to move mileage up to equipment, you can just drag that and put it in there, set it in whichever order you like. If you want mileage to go back, in this section I didn't speak about it before, but when you're editing a line item where you can change the name, the description, unit costs, quantity, you can also change the category. So I'll just put that back to mileage and go done. And then it basically shows up down here as mileage. Now, a really, really powerful feature, I'm going to clear this invoice, is Invoice Templates. So when you create an invoice, you've got template A, and it's importing labor, mileage, and equipment, which I detailed before. But you can set this by default. So I know a lot of Australian crew will invoice their labor as PAYG, and then they might do a ABN or a kind of a business invoice for their equipment. So Crewcall allows for that with this Invoice Templates. So you've got on this left side template A, and then you've got on this right side template B. So if I can tap up here just to enable or disable template B. What I might want to do is select template A and make it a PAYG request. And I don't want tax for that because it's labor. And because it's PAYG, I want it paid in 14 days for labor. And then I pop down here and I change that to be just labor. It's not going to make invoices with equipment or mileage, it's going to make invoices with labor only. Then if I enable Invoice Template B, it's basically going to say, all right, template A will use labor and template B will use equipment and mileage. And because this is going to be for equipment and mileage, it might be called a tax invoice. I'm going to make tax enabled and 30-day payment. So you'll see that updates and gives me a summary of how that invoice template is set. And the idea is once you set this once, you're done. You don't need to ever do it again because usually you'll be invoicing the exact same way. So I can pop over to Invoices and I can go create invoice. And you'll see here now I've got Invoice Template B and I've got Invoice Template A. And that's kind of copied in the settings that I set in my invoice settings as like my defaults. So if I just go create, you'll see now it creates two invoices. One's a PAYG request and one's a tax invoice. And if I go in the PAYG request and I look at the line items, it's all my labor, that's it. And then essentially no discounts, no GST, no tax. And then if I go over to the tax invoice, I'll look at the line items and it is just my equipment and just my mileage. And then you can see it's applied tax to all of those items. And then essentially you go create invoice and you've got a tax invoice with your equipment and mileage. And if you went back to your PAYG request and hit create PDF invoice, you've got a PAYG request, which is just for all your labor. So that makes it super simple to generate 2 invoices really quickly for either labor or for equipment. The other option that you also have is from the jobs section. If you tap and hold on a job, you can just go convert to invoice, and it's going to show that here, and I can disable or enable invoice template B, or I might, for this specific invoice, I might be doing something different. So I might disable B and just say I want labor and equipment, but with using my invoice template A, and I'm going to hit create. It's telling me that I've already made invoices for this job, so it's just giving me a warning, but I can just hit continue, and then I'll say, do I want to go look at the invoice? I go yes, and it pops over here, and I can look at the invoice straight away. The other little section I didn't show you is if you tap the name up here, PAYG request, you can essentially change everything after the fact. So I might just change that to be tax invoice. I might want to change the invoice number to be, 04, or I might want to change it now to be IMV, 001. And I can also add a PO number, and I can just put like, PO number. And when you put a PO number in, it will show that up here, and it automatically adds in the hash when you list it up here. But then if I generate that, you'll see here where I've essentially got, I'll just zoom in a bit better, where you got tax invoice, and it'll say your invoice number that you just changed. It'll say that there's a PO number if that's required for your job, due date, invoice total. The other thing you'll also notice too, so if I just clear these out for a second, and I'm just going to make a fresh one for everything as one invoice. If I mark that as sent, that's going to update my job in here saying that it is sent. And then if I mark it as paid and set it to, February, whatever, and then jump back here, it's going to be marked as paid. And if I had a look in here, the dates are equivalent. So jobs and invoices kind of work together, but they are also separate. So it allows you to kind of customize jobs, log them when you're doing that, and then instantly convert it to an invoice. But when it's an invoice, you can jump in and you can say, all right, I want to get rid of that line item. It's not letting me delete because it's marked as paid, but I can jump in and go, no, I do not want to have that line item. Okay, I want to just maybe I want to put all my overtime together and bundle it like that, or anything like that. You can go down here and you go, actually I want the cine tape to come before the high five, or I want the 13-inch monitor at the back. And then you can tweak all that stuff. If you wanted to add a new line item, you can just add a blank equipment, and then kind of, just no equipment, and shoot day 1. And then you might say, okay, cool, well, that costs $400, or not 4,000, and I've got 2 of those. And I want GST applied, and then it just shows up down here as a line item. And then I can tap and change it, or I can delete it as I see fit. And if you just want to use it as, hey, I want to make an invoice, as I mentioned before, you can just create a blank invoice. And it will create a blank invoice using template A. It's not tied to a job. Your production company is not selected, but you could select another production company. So yeah, if you wanted to change a production company, all the details are stored into here. So you can essentially just pick one and you can change all those details as need be. Or if you look at one that's already filled, they're in here. The other thing you can also do is you've got some sorting options here too. So by default, they're sorted alphabetically. But if you've got a number of invoices, you can search by invoice due, and it will show all the invoices that are due up the top. And once I mark that as sent and I mark it as paid, and I go back here and look at my production companies, it's telling me that there's nothing due, but in total I've invoiced them 5,120. And you can sort by all sorts of other different things, and your invoices can also be sorted. So you've got a vast array of customization options. You can design your invoice to your heart's content, tweak designs, change out logos, do all sorts of stuff, and it just makes everything super, super simple to be able to, set it up once and create really nice custom looking invoices. So I hope that serves as a valid explainer. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Any suggestions, fire away, because they are most welcome. All right, thank you for your time.